Imagine a massive head-on collision. I really want you to picture this.
Okay.
On one side, you have the old world, an aging monarchy, an economy built, entirely on the backs of enslaved people.
Right, a society obsessed with titles, nobility, the church. It's all very slow, very heavy.
And then on the other side, you have the new world crashing in at full speed.
You've got the explosion of coffee wealth, the screech of steam trains, international banking.
And this growing, very loud demand for a republic. That is the scene in Brazil in the second half of the 19th century. It's a moment of just absolute tension.
It's the story of how an empire falls. But the mission for this deep dive is a bit more nuanced than that. We want to figure out, was it actually a revolution?
Or was it just a rebranding of power?
That's the question.
It is the big question. And to figure that out, we've got a serious stack of sources today. We're pulling from historical analysis of the Second Reign. We're parsing 19th century slavery laws, which is eye-opening.
And we have some amazing visual satire from the Revista Ilustrada. I love that source. It was basically the political Twitter of the 1880s.
So sharp. And we also have a fantastic breakdown from the History channel HIStudo that focuses on continuities and ruptures.
Because often in history, what stays the same is just as shocking as what changes.
Exactly. We focus on the flag changing, but the daily life of the average person. That's where the real story is.
So let's start with the engine that was driving absolutely everything.
Coffee.
Coffee. It wasn't just a crop, it was the heartbeat of the economy, the oil of the 19th century for Brazil. But here's the key thing from the sources.
What's that?
Coffee didn't create a unified Brazil. It actually created two completely different Brazils.
This is the coffee divide. I found this fascinating. You just picture coffee barons as one big group of rich guys.
But they were split into two camps with very different motivations. First, you have the traditionalists.
Okay, who are they?
These were the barons in the Vale do Paraíba, on the border between Rio and São Paulo, and also the old sugar elites up in the northeast.
These are the guys closer to the emperor, right? The old guard.
Exactly, the ones with the titles. But by the late 19th century, they were in serious trouble. Their soil was exhausted, their farms were old.
And their whole operation, it relied on slave labor?
Completely. They were stuck. They had no plan B. For them, ending slavery meant financial ruin.
So that's Group A, the declining old guard, clinging to the past because they're basically going broke.
And then you have Group B.
The modernizers.
The modernizers in the Oeste Paulista Western São Paulo. This was the dynamic frontier. The sources talk about the terra roxa, the purple earth.
Incredibly fertile. These farms were just printing money.
And because they were so profitable, they had options, they could experiment, they started investing in European immigrants, paying wages.
They were looking at Europe and the U.S. and saying, we can be that.
Totally. And this is where the politics gets, it gets really cynical.
You mean they didn't just support modernization because they were enlightened good guys?
Not at all. It was a power play. The Western farmers started supporting abolition partly as a way to boycott the traditional oligarchies.
Wait, so let me get this straight.
Yeah.
You kill slavery to kill the economic base of your rival.
That's it. The Westerners knew they could survive the transition to wage labor. The old guard couldn't. So supporting abolition was a way to bankrupt the competition.
Wow. Using human freedom as a weapon to kneecap your opponents.
And speaking of that labor transition, we have to talk about the whitening theory mentioned in the analysis.
Right, because this wasn't just about labor, it was also a racial project.
A huge one. The elite promoted European immigration because it aligned with this racist ideal of branqueamento, literally whitening the population over time.
So they're importing Italians and Germans, not just to pick coffee, but to dilute the African influence in the country.
Correct. It was modernization wrapped in some really ugly pseudoscientific prejudice.
Let's zoom in on slavery itself for a moment, because we have this image from the Revista Ilustrada from 1880. And it's haunting.
It's visceral. It shows a white man literally riding on the back of a black man, using a whip, treating him like an animal.
It just cuts right through all the economic talk and shows you the absolute dehumanization.
And that's what the abolitionists were fighting. But the empire, the government, they were trying to delay the inevitable.
So instead of just ending it, we get this idea of legal gradualism.
A series of laws that sound good on paper, but when you read the fine print, they're incredibly cynical.
Okay, like the Law of the Free Womb in 1871. The headline is great. Children born to enslaved women are free.
A fine print says the owner keeps the child until age 8. Then the owner gets a choice.
A choice.
Either take cash from the state, basically selling the child's freedom to the government, or use the child's labor until they're 21.
So you're free, but you're actually enslaved until you're an adult.
And guess which one the owners chose? Then you get the sexagenarians law in 1885.
This one freed enslaved people over the age of 60.
Which couldn't have been that many people, given the life expectancy. And again, a catch.
What was it this time?
They had to work until 65 as a form of reparations to the master.
Hold on. The enslaved person had to pay reparations to the master?
In the form of their own labor, yes. But here's the irony. This law completely backfired on the government. The slave owners were furious.
Why? They were getting free labor.
Because there was no cash indemnity. They felt the state was stealing their assets.
And this all builds up to 1888. The Golden Law. Ley Area.
Total abolition, no conditions, and crucially, no money for the owners.
And this is the aha moment the sources point to. Politically, this was the final nail in the coffin for the empire.
Because the slave owners, the emperor's biggest supporters, turned on him overnight.
They became known as the Republicans of May 14th.
The law was signed on May 13th. The very next day, these die-hard monarchists become Republicans, not out of a love for democracy,
but out of pure revenge. Spite. So the empire loses its biggest pillar of support, the landowners. But an empire doesn't fall just because some farmers are mad. The sources talk about three pillars crumbling.
Right. The landowners, the church, and the military. And Emperor Pedro II somehow managed to alienate all three of them.
Okay, let's take the church, the religious question. I was surprised the emperor could actually veto the pope.
It was called the Beneplácito. It was in the Constitution. The emperor could approve or reject papal orders in Brazil.
And this worked fine until
Pope Pio IX went to war against the Freemasons.
And the emperor. He was a Mason.
He was, and so was a huge chunk of the political elite. So when the Pope ordered Masons banned from religious brotherhoods, the emperor just said, no, that order is invalid here.
But some bishops didn't listen to the emperor. They obeyed the pope.
The bishops of Olinda and Belém, they started closing down brotherhoods, and the emperor's response was
harsh.
He had them arrested.
And sentenced to hard labor.
Hard labor. For a bishop, that's a PR nightmare.
It was a massive scandal. Now, the sentences were commuted, but the damage was done. The Catholic Church basically said, we're done with you.
So, landowners, gone. Church, gone. That just leaves the military. The guys with the guns.
And this is the military question. It really starts after the Paraguayan War. The army comes back from that war feeling strong, professional, proud.
But when they got back to Rio, they felt left out.
The sources say alejados da vida pública, sidelined from public life. The empire was run by civilian lawyers, these frock coats. The military felt they were doing the heavy lifting but getting no respect and no voice.
And this is where that philosophy positivism comes in. I always see order and progress on the Brazilian flag, but I never realized it was this whole movement.
It was huge. Positivism preached that society evolves scientifically, in stages.
From a theological stage to a metaphysical one, and then finally to the positive stage.
Exactly. And for these military officers, the monarchy was obsolete, stuck in the past. A republic that was positive, that was scientific.
They started believing in a civic dictatorship, that only the army was organized enough to lead Brazil into the future.
So now you have a military that feels disrespected and has a philosophical playbook that says it's their scientific duty to take over.
That is a very dangerous mix for an emperor who has no one left to defend him.
Extremely.
So the stage is set. It's November 1889. How does the actual drop happen? Because the sources describe it as almost an accident.
It was a coup, plain and simple, and it was triggered by a rumor.
A rumor? Really?
Yes, a rumor started flying that the leader of the army, Marshal Deodoro da Fonseca, was about to be arrested.
Was it even true?
Probably not, but it was enough. On November 15th, Deodoro marches his troops out.
And the government at this point was trying these last-ditch reforms to save the system, right?
Too little, too late. The military moved. We have that painting by Benedito Calixto in the sources. It's so telling.
What does it show?
It's a military parade. Troops, officers, cannons. It's clean, it's orderly. But where are the people?
They're just bystanders.
Yeah.
Watching from the sidelines.
Exactly. One witness famously said the people watched bestializados like stunned beasts. They had no idea what was happening. They thought it was just a parade.
That says everything. This wasn't a popular revolution.
It was a boardroom change, not a grassroots movement. But there was also a structural reason for this. The representation crisis.
Right. The money talking again. By 1889, São Paulo was producing a sixth of the entire national economy.
But in parliament, they had fewer seats than some declining provinces in the Northeast.
So the economic powerhouse of the country was being treated like a junior partner. The Paulista elites were tired of Rio and the Northeast making the rules.
Okay, so the emperor is out, the republic is in, new flag, new anthem. But now we get to the HIStudo analysis, the continuities and ruptures.
This is where we answer our first question: revolution or rebranding?
And the verdict is, for the average person, very little changed. Let's talk about the big continuity. Cornelismo.
Okay, explain cornelismo. This is essential for understanding Brazil.
It comes from when local elites could buy the military title of colonel. By the time of the Republic, they weren't actual soldiers, but they were the local bosses.
The guy who owns the land, the store, and the sheriff.
And, crucially, owns the votes.
Yeah.
The Republic brought elections, but not democracy. The voting was open, not secret.
Wait, you had to say who you were voting for out loud?
Or sign a paper in front of everyone. This led to the voto de cabresto, the vote of the halter, like for a horse. The colonel would march his workers to the polls to vote for his candidate.
And if you said no,
you lost your job, your home, or worse. It was pure coercion.
so the Republic was just a way to legitimize the power these local oligarchs already had.
Precisely. The HIStudo analysis calls it a shift from nobility to oligarchy. The title changed, but the power dynamic didn't.
And what about the social structure? Were people included?
No, the new constitution banned illiterates from voting.
Which was almost everyone.
The vast majority. So the newly freed black population, poor rural workers, they were legally erased from citizenship. It's a closed loop. We don't educate you, so you can't vote for education.
Okay, that's pretty bleak. Were there any ruptures? Did anything change?
There were some. The economy did start to diversify. You see the growth of banking, urban services, the first little industrial surges.
And that creates new kinds of people. It's not just masters and slaves anymore.
Right. You get an open middle class, doctors, lawyers, and you get a proletariat, factory workers. And because of that European immigration, many of them brought radical ideas with them.
Socialism, anarchism.
So the cities become these pressure cookers of new ideas, while the countryside is stuck in the past. That clash becomes the defining feature of the era.
And inside the military, things were changing there too.
Yes. Remember those young officers who wanted order and progress? Well, they quickly realized the republic they helped create had been hijacked by corrupt oligarchs.
They did the coup, but the coffee barons got the prize.
Exactly. This leads to tenentismo, the lieutenant movement. Young soldiers launching revolts to try and fix the republic they felt had been betrayed.
It really all circles back to that initial idea of modernization colliding with these archaic structures.
That is the summary of the period. The economy was running on steam, but the politics was still running on horse and buggy.
And the final irony, the one highlighted by all our sources,
is the birth of the republic itself. It wasn't the people storming the Bastille.
It was a military coup backed by slave owners who were mad they lost their property.
Yeah.
And a church that was mad the emperor arrested 2 bishops.
It was a revolution of the elites, by the elites, for the elites. The people were just spectators.
Which leaves us with a provocative thought to chew on. If the political system was designed from the very start by elites to protect elites,
then you have to ask yourself, how much of that kernel dynamic, that coronelismo, still lingers in local power structures today?
are there still votes of the halter, just hidden under different names, maybe more sophisticated mechanisms?
That is a question that might explain a lot about modern politics. Not just in Brazil, but anywhere. Old power structures survive new regimes.
A question for another deep dive, perhaps. But for now, thanks for exploring the birth of the Brazilian Republic with us.
Always a pleasure.